Great. My name is Niels, and I work for Trifork, and been doing a lot of app development. We seem to be doing that in Trifork. And recently, just this year in Copenhagen, we decided to also try out Xamarin. So we've been building native apps in mostly Android and iOS, and we decided why not try some Xamarin. Everybody talks about it. We should probably see what can it do. So I've been part of 2 Xamarin projects this year. It's been an interesting experience, so I feel I know a lot more what the platform can do and also what it cannot do. So just to summarize, I think Xamarin, when you're doing cross-platform, it makes it easier to make apps. It makes it, quite frankly, harder to make great apps. Sort of where I'm at.
Well,
Q.
yeah, so I'll pull this in closer. I'm not a fan of microphones, so I'd much rather just shout. So apologies whoever has to master this later, because I'm going to be quite loud. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. So I think that Xamarin's an interesting one because we've got the Xamarin Forms, and a lot of people assume that Xamarin Forms is Xamarin. And so what I tend to see going out and meeting customers is they say it's difficult to build great apps using Xamarin. Whereas what they really mean is it's difficult to build great apps using Xamarin Forms. And you're not wrong. If you're going with the traditional approach and you're using the storyboard designer, you're using Android XML with our design tools, there is no reason why you can't build experience for your user that is as delightful as an app built with Objective-C or Java. It's down to possibly your UX team rather than the tool set that you're using. You have 100% access to every API that the native developers have access to.
But I'd like to reply to that, because we did not use Xamarin Forms.
Okay.
The projects were not appropriate for that, because Xamarin Form is great if you want to make an app that's not that pretty. You can do that really fast for free projects, and it's great for some things. That was not appropriate here. And I'm not saying you cannot build great apps. What I'm saying is it's not easier when you're using Xamarin. And the reason, and there are 2 reasons for that we found in our experience. First of all, we were able to share some code, but the code we were able to share was the kind of code that there wasn't so much problems in REST client and so on. Where we spend a lot of our time is actually building the UI, building specialized UI components, and really trying to get the most out of the device. And when you're really trying to get use out of your device, it's not helpful to have something between you and your device. And Xamarin, I think it's impressive what you've done, because I do think it's a great piece of engineering. I'm not questioning your abilities. I'm just challenging the underlying principles of what you're doing. So
yeah, I think if you're going to build an app that is highly customized in terms of the UI, then I mentioned earlier before, we tend to see about 75 to 80% code reuse. But if your app is purely UI and there is no real anything going on other than UI, then at that point there is very limited advantage of using Xamarin, because you've shifted to 80% custom UI, 20% background code.
And isn't that what great apps are about? Is almost all UI?
No, I disagree. So you've got to deliver a fantastic UI, but what you mentioned is about using a lot of RESTful services, which tends to push the processing up into the cloud. Now, I mentioned earlier in the talk that I'm building a beer tracking app. There's a very, very popular app called Untapped, which is for tracking how many beers you drink, and it can make suggestions. And it's built using Cordova. Now, it doesn't do offline. Now, when I'm in a pub and I want to be able to search for a beer and add it to my beer library, I want to be able to still have the results available to me. What are the top 100 beers for the UK, or what are the top 100 beers in Denmark, and have it saved offline, so when I go to the pub and I search for it, it's there, it's available, I can add it. And when I'm next on the internet and I've got connectivity, we'll sync it back back up. But if you create all of your apps with a beautiful UI calling into a RESTful service, yes, you've offloaded a lot of your processing, but actually your app isn't going to work offline, which mobile apps need to.
Well, we actually did have offline capabilities, but offline capabilities is still easier to code than actually coding UI when it's specialized. So I think it's more that, yeah, it is very UI intensive, and it tends to be people who ask Trifork to build something is usually because they want something where we do more with the UI. Yeah. So if they want a cruddy ad, they'll probably do it themselves. So cruddy looking, like complete rubbish looking, like Xamarin Forms like app.
Agree with that.
So I think in our experience it didn't really help us so much. That doesn't mean that there's no case for Xamarin. I think it lowers the barrier for who can create apps in this space. But I do think that there is a number of apps that where it doesn't really add anything.
So maybe we can talk about something other than Xamarin, or Xamarin bashing.
Yeah.
So I'm also Trifork. We've had good experience with apps that were built in like Unity or other kind of systems where you don't really care about the UI looking like the native stuff, right? So there's games. We don't have much experience with games, but that's my impression also that games tend to be written in systems where you make up your own UI anyway. So that's like a category. If you categorize these different kinds of apps, right? There's category of apps where you don't care that it doesn't look like an iPhone app or an Android app or whatnot. It's just an app. And then in that space, there's a lot of value. It's very easy to write a cross-platform app where it just looks the same on all platforms, and frankly, to some use cases, that's a big gain. It's easy if it just looks all the same. So that's one thing. Another category is, it's also perfectly fine to do an inexpensive app that just gets the job done, right? That it doesn't look like it's not a great app, but it's useful. It could still be very useful. Might be a bit slow or whatnot, but it's there, and you always have it in your pocket. No. I mean, it also depends on what your team knows what to do, right? Because if many places you have a shop of web developers, JavaScripties that know how to do that, know all this CSS and stuff. I never really cracked that CSS code. But if that's the capability you have, then it also makes a lot of sense to go like down the boxed web app approach. And of course, that's also not going to give you a great app, because the great app is when it comes to building the native UI that really looks and feels like it's an integral part of the system you're using. So I mean, that's getting the best of all the worlds. I think that's impossible. Of course, that's what he's trying.
Yeah. Well, we're no silver bullet, and I think that's the really key thing here. You mentioned about the core competencies of your staff. Mm-hmm. If you're a JavaScript shop, then actually going with a Xamarin solution probably isn't the right technology for you, because your staff already know JavaScript, they're going to know HTML5, they're going to know CSS, they're going to be able to produce an app with something like Cordova or jQuery Mobile in a tenth of the time that it would take to learn Objective-C, Swift, Java, or C#. So you go with what your staff's core competencies are. So if you're a .NET shop and you're building MVC5 apps or WPF apps, and you're like, we need to go mobile, You're sat in Visual Studio every single day. You've got .NET libraries that you've already invested hundreds of man hours to write, and you want to go mobile. At that point, Xamarin starts to make sense. But if you've got a clean slate, you've got a customer that's come to you, and you've got a whole wealth of Objective-C experience, and they're like, we want an iOS app. Well, if your team knows Objective-C and it's a one-off app, that you know it's almost a throwaway app, you're not going to have to maintain it for a huge amount of time, then just go with what you know. I'm never keen to go into a business where they've already rolled out an app. The sales team often try to get me to do this, to go into a business where they built their app using Objective-C for iOS, and they built it for Java using for Android, and they want me to go in there and pitch to a room full of developers that they should be using C#, and I just won't do it because it's madness. Because you should be using what you're most comfortable with and most performant with. The pitch for Xamarin is you're a C# .NET dev, you love Visual Studio, but you want to hit, or you need to hit, iOS or Android. At that point, it becomes a very compelling thing to be using. When we look at things like Unity, that's C# again. So if you want to do gaming and you're a C# developer, look at things like Unity. Look at Coca 2DS, which we've got bindings for, or look at Mono Game, which is, Microsoft killed XNA, and the community, backed by Mono, which is what Xamarin is built on, picked up the slack and re-implemented it. So you can build XNA games now for iOS, Android, PS3, PS4, Xbox 360. Not the Xbox One yet. Don't ask me how .NET code runs on a PS4 before it runs on an Xbox, but classic Microsoft. But it's about where you feel most comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I will concur with that. One of our clients specifically wanted Xamarin because they were a C# shop. So they didn't save any money, but they got a platform that they could review and maintain. So yeah, it's perfectly valid. So I think I'm done Xamarin bashing.
That's good to
for
hear.
a little while.
I have a question. Can somebody kick me off?
I have a note I can think about it.
Oh. Give him a hand.
Yeah, so I'm a Trifork as well. Fairly new at Trifork. I've been a Unity developer for 6 years now, and there's a lot of good things to say about Unity. There's a lot of bad things to say as well, and the point is very valid that if you build something where you can make stuff look the same on a lot of different platforms, then it's going to be easier to build applications. But you're absolutely right that they're probably going to be not quite as good as if you built them all natively. But it's going to cost you a whole lot less to get them out on a lot of platforms. And I think the most important consideration is, it's a good point that I think every option that you have, whether it's Xamarin or Unity or something else, it's valid for some projects. I think you can't find a solution that you could say, well, that's never a valid solution for anything. You can always find some validity for any solution that you can find out there. But you have the only way to figure out, so for our next project and customer needs, user needs, whatever, how do we figure out what the right technology is? Well, you have to try them out. You have to try out Xamarin to figure it out. You have to try out Unity. I have to get the know-how and make a good decision based on that knowledge.
Does anyone have any experience with HTML5 apps or any opinions on it? I'd be happy to relinquish my seat.
Can I ask my question now?
Yes, go ahead.
Change a little bit over the time here. You said that you didn't save any money by making the Xamarin product, at least not if it has to be a high-end app. But would you say it's just as easy? Or is it just as capable? Because theoretically it has hooks into all the API So you should be able to do everything that you can do in native Objective-C or Swift.
Yes, more or less.
So if you were to create a new product, let's say you're a new team, you're a startup or something, you haven't really you don't have that much experience in any language, would it make sense to go the Xamarin way, provided you had the money to actually go that route? Because maybe, as we've seen, Xamarin has improved a lot over the past couple of years. Maybe it would continue that arc, and actually at some point become everything that they want it to be.
I think it's really how much do you expect to spend in really fine-tuning UI versus other parts of your app.
Sure.
Because the more fine-tuning you get in, the more it gets in the way, and it kind of eats up of the savings. If you're a little less UI heavy, you can save something. If you're starting from scratch on all 3 platforms.
Okay, so you're actually saying it's harder than Objective-C, just sitting in Xcode and doing the same work.
Yes, and even though, and it's
how come?
It's only because you have an extra component that can model things up. And
what is the extra component? Because who's familiar with platform invocation? Has anyone done p-invoke before? Come on, someone in the yeah. So Microsoft had a C-bound API, which was Win32. They created .NET, which was a managed language, and they were like, we've got this lovely API. I say lovely. We know Win32 isn't beautiful, but it's got some useful bits. We want to be able to call into that from C#. So they created platform invocation so that we can call this native code from a managed language. That's all we've done. So actually, I'm going to have to say that your argument that it's easier in Objective-C is factually wrong, because literally it's a one-to-one mapping. I can take an Objective-C method and convert it straight into C#. It's no more difficult.
But I'm definitely not talking about performance here. And because you can absolutely get the same performance, the same look and feel. What you do have is you have a complexity of another framework in there, and it does trip you up when you're trying some of the things.
You're using UIKit. You're using the same frame. You're literally using the same framework as the Swift and Objective-C developers.
And sometimes stuff happens that you wouldn't happen if you did it native. So we would try things, and then it doesn't work, but it works if we were to do it in a native platform. So you kind of hit some of those snags sometimes. And that's when, so it's another thing that you spend time on managing. There's another dependency management on top. So that was where we kind of felt we were losing some of the time we were using. But I will also say this: there's also a couple of things that are good about Xamarin. So it's not just about Xamarin thing. Because one thing that was actually very nice about working in Xamarin is that when you're working several platforms, you can share code. And even though I don't think we save time by sharing code, I think you do improve your overall collaboration when you can talk in actual classes versus normally when we're doing each platform, we talk a lot about how we model things, but then we go off our separate ways and build separate code bases. It's very nice that you're using the same model objects. There's also another quality parameter which is interesting, which is when you're building for several platforms, is that you want the apps to work the same way. So even though it's a small part of the code, it's not where you spend most of the time, it's nice that you can put that in the shared code, because that means that your behavior can sort of be centralized in one place. So that's one quality parameter where you get something out of Xamarin. So
I think it's hard also because we looked at it. We're just students, I guess, but we looked at Xamarin to see if that was the route we wanted to go. And I'm from IT Minds. We're iOS developers, or the ones that looked at it, and we have very high standards for the tools. I mean, that's why we went to iOS in the first place, because the tools are so nice. And when we went to Xamarin, it wasn't quite there. I mean, it's close. It's very close. It's insanely close, but it's just the last 2%. The interface builder wasn't just as snappy, and there's just a little more delay when you're building and stuff like that. And I think that's probably why you're not fulfilled with the Xamarin experience if you come from an iOS development or a background. But I think if you're starting and you don't know, or if we give Xamarin time to actually get the tools where they need to be, then there must be a very good case to use Xamarin, because in some way you must gain something from being able to share code.
Yeah, well, there are definitely gains for it.
Please
so
kick me off if you have questions.
I think I also have another comment. That is that the thing you gain on using something like Xamarin is if you have native development, then typically you have Android developers and you have iOS developers, and they don't shift. So iOS developers keep developing on iOS projects and Android developers keep developing on Android projects. But if you use a cross-platform tool, then you can basically mix up those experiences and have them on the same team and work in a cross-platform tool.
if you buy enough licenses, yes.
Well,
But yeah,
but that's not my department. I'm
No.
just a developer.
yeah.
So I just asked for the license. but it's the same with Unity.
Yeah.
Well, basically, you could develop with Unity. In the newer versions of Unity, you can develop the full app because you have all features available in the free version, and then basically when you need to launch it, you could buy the license, I guess. But yeah, but that would still, you have the full feature set, but you have some tools that aren't enabled.
Wow, another brave man.
Yes. Is it on? Oh, so Niels, you talked about the whole UI experience and how that weren't easy to do. But what about the quality of the code you actually write? Because last time I did some Android stuff, it was really cumbersome to start a thread and wait for it to come back. But with C# you got the whole async await, and we heard a lot about asynchronous stuff, and it's all built in, and it's going to make your code really clean on all the platforms.
Yeah, well, it's C# compared to Java 7 is definitely a prettier language, so you get some prettier code. So my only trouble is I cannot write C# faster or read it faster than I can do Java. So it's not the big economic gain, but yeah, it's a more beautiful language.
Which I would count for a lot in a big team where you share code and make it readable and testable.
But it's not more readable, that's the thing. It's prettier syntax, it's not more readable.
Okay. So you see that syntax sugar on top?
Yeah, because I've been doing Java for a long time, so I can read it very well. So it doesn't really give me any productivity gain to work in C#. But that would probably be different if you don't come from that background.
And as well, if you're an Objective-C developer, I mean, Objective-C is a horrifically verbose language, exceptionally easy to read, just because Apple have made it painfully obvious what everything is doing. But to actually write it, I think you probably wear through a few keyboards just to get through an app, because you end up typing so much stuff. Swift does kind of fix this. But if you're going to build an app with Swift, it's like F# version 1. And F# is now in version 3, and we support everything that we do in C#, we can do in F#. So again, it becomes why bother? So yeah, I think if you're looking at pure languages, Java versus C#, everyone knows C# is a bit more modern and a bit nicer, but actually you really can, if you're a Java developer, just uppercase and you're pretty much there, especially when you're doing Xamarin. Android development, because it's a one-to-one mappings, just uppercase and you're good to go. Whereas with the Objective-C to C#, it's very easy to read Objective-C, horrible to write, in my opinion. You may disagree. But there's I think there's a huge bonus for using C# over Objective-C if your developers in-house have only ever used a managed language. Trying to explain pointers to people who've never, what? and memory management. Lots of developers don't want to get involved with that. A lot of developers that I meet have subscribed to the notion that computers are intelligent enough to deal with their own memory. We shouldn't, as developers, be having to deal with this nonsense. It kind of comes back to my earlier point that it's about horses for courses, where you're most comfortable. And if you love Objective-C, and there are people out there that are die-hard Objective-C fans, it's not for me. I'm not a JavaScript guy either. I'll write it, I can read it, I'm happy to do it. I say happy, I will do it. I'm not going to be happy about it. Whereas I feel most at home in Visual Studio writing C#. That is where I feel warm and fuzzy inside when I'm writing code. And that's why Xamarin was a natural fit for me. Because I was a customer, just to point out, I was a customer before I was an employee. I was drinking the Kool-Aid whilst I was paying before I jumped ship and joined the company. So I'm not someone that's come into the company and then decided, I should probably learn this stuff. I was actually at the coalface developing apps with it. And I came from a C++ background, so I understood the importance of, performant whilst being native. So, yeah.
Well, on top of that, can you share some of the experiences you had before you joined Xamarin with the teams you were in, building apps using the product?
So I was a lone Xamarin developer on the team at the previous company. So I built an app using jQuery Mobile. So has anyone seen the London Eye? It's a big Ferris wheel next to, Big Ben. Have you seen it? Yeah, so the lights on that are controlled by something called Pharos. And it's an embedded ARM processor that's got some I/O, so you can do inputs and outs. It's got RS-232, 485, MIDI, does Ethernet commands as well. And you program the lights on this bad boy. And they've got two of them strapped to the outside. They've been going around for 8 years now, and it works perfectly. But the way you interact with it is you go into the control booth where they've got the big knob to say how fast it's going, and there's a computer that's running like Windows 2000. Thankfully it wasn't ME, but it's got a web page on it that connects to the controllers, and each controller has got a tiny little web server on it. So you can press buttons on the built-in web page that queries the programming of the box. And I want to fire a rainbow, and then the wheel starts doing a rainbow color, or I want to set it to blue. And the engineers were like, well, we're going into the box and setting the lights like animals, but we've got this roof over us and we can't see what's going on, and it's just talking to it on the Wi-Fi. So there is a private Wi-Fi at the London Eye to control the lights. I will say no more. But they were like, we want to control this from our iPads. And at the time, we were a Qt house. We were writing Qt. I can never. Are we Qt or Qt? Qt. So we're a Qt house, and they didn't have the QML stuff ready to go for mobile. They had just started to bring it out with Qt 5 for desktop. It was so early, they didn't even have the compile libraries ready to go. You had to sit there and compile it like an animal yourself. So going with QML for mobile just wasn't even an option. It had to be cross-platform what I created. So I was like, right, I'll go hybrid. I didn't know any better. So I downloaded jQuery Mobile. Well, I actually downloaded JQ Touch. And the developer that built that abandoned it when he was hired by Censure Touch. So I then jumped over and started building it in Censure Touch. And I didn't particularly enjoy the development experience of that. Because I'd gone from Visual Studio down into basically a text editor. I was like, this is not the way to write software. But the UI for Censure Touch looked very nice. Someone had spent a lot of time doing the CSS styling. For a web page, it looked great. And I was like, right, I'll try jQuery Mobile. And we had a reasonable success with that. But what we actually shipped to the guys at the London Eye, they didn't like it. They said it doesn't feel right. They said it looks right because I made it look how they had designed. But it said it doesn't feel right. And it's because it needed to basically work the same on iPad and iPhone. And it was little subtle things, and it's all about the subtlety of the app. When you transition from view A to view B, and I said I wanted to do a slide, if they'd launched the web app from the springboard to the home screen on the iPad, it would flash through white every time. And that was just a bug in jQuery Mobile. And has anyone looked at the source code for jQuery Mobile? It's horrible, isn't it? No one wants to start debugging that, and you're debugging in a web browser as well. It's horrible. It's just nasty. So I was like, there's got to be a better way. And they came to me and they said, we want a color wheel, so we want to be able to select a group of lights on the London Eye and drag around and change the color live. I was like, well, that's reasonable, isn't it? This is a web page. So I was like, I've got to make it happen. And it was a Friday evening I got the email that said that they were doing that. I was like, I'm going to have to quit my job. I can't write any more bloody JavaScript. And I got home that evening. I was like, right, I'm going to find a cross-platform native solution. And I literally just typed in C# iPhone, and Xamarin was the top link. And back then, you couldn't even trial Xamarin. There was no starter edition. They didn't even have Visual Studio support. It was just mono-develop, running on OS 10, and you had to use Xcode to do your UI design and do the actions and outlets and all that madness. But I pulled out my credit card and I bought a license. And over 48 hours, I built an app that controlled with a color picker, a native color picker, well, hey, for the London Eye. And I shared about 80% of the code. So the following week, when I went into work, I managed to build the Android version, which again was 100% native. The London Eyes guys, they loved it. The app was finally what they wanted. I was sharing a whole load of code, and it was native. So like my experience of getting into mobile, I kind of fell into it. It was just because I pulled the short straw, and the guys were like, well, you're going to have to write some JavaScript now. And I was like, no, I'm not writing JavaScript forever. So that's kind of my background in how I fell in love with the technology. Yeah, but I would still build web apps, and I still have built web apps whilst I've been employed at Xamarin, because there are certain situations. Philips, the lighting company, got a trade show booth. They wanted to be able to control all the lights on the trade show. They had a multitude of devices. I had a very short amount of time to make their UI how they wanted it to. It had to look the same on everything. I wasn't going to do that with Xamarin because it would take more time to do the pixel perfect design on Android and Android and iOS, whereas hybrid, perfect for that. I don't enjoy writing hybrid, but it certainly has its place. Wow, that was a rant, wasn't it? I can ramble.
Good story.
If you're just dead silent, somebody from the audience must come up here and say something.
We're waiting.
I think you should pick someone. Just drag them up.
Well, I'd like to hear more about jQuery Mobile. So
Yeah. You're back.
Could you come up and tell me tell us what you've been working on in? Yeah.
Hey.
Well done.
Here for you.
Great. I think I've tried this before in a retrospective or so. Okay, so I got out to a customer, so I'm a consultant, and they had this existing web app, and it was built in jQuery Mobile. And I thought, great, I love this. It is 2015, and they have chosen jQuery Mobile. Okay, I can work with this. I've done a lot of jQuery before, so no problem. Until we thought, okay, maybe we want to do something a bit more modern, like data binding. And I said, okay, let's do this. So we tried putting a knockout on top of jQuery Mobile, which worked okay. It could have been better. But at some point I had to fiddle around with some events and stuff, and well, lo and behold, it didn't work. And I thought, okay, I'll try and debug this. And I just couldn't figure it out, so I had to dive into jQuery Mobile, and actually all the way down through jQuery Mobile's event handlers and into jQuery itself, and it was just oh my god. I don't know what they have been thinking. I think they're smart guys. No, I'm not bashing anyone, but it was not pretty, and I had a hard time understanding it, to be honest. So, not a pleasant experience, but I think I eventually found a workaround or something, but yeah.
So is your background a JavaScript developer, you know, front end?
I've primarily been doing that, yes, but from a educational standpoint, I'm IT engineer, so I'm also educated in C#, and I love it too. So I haven't tried out Xamarin yet, like for real, but I think I'm going to get into it.
Have you looked at things like Cordova and the other web technologies?
Not really, not that much. Of course, I know about it, but not really, like professionally. So I actually recently got into I downloaded Xamarin once again to try and take a look at it and actually try and see. Well, I did something in Visual Studio on Windows and that ran perfectly, and I thought, okay, does it actually work in OS 10? Right, I have a Mac, like, okay. And it actually just worked out of the box, and I was like, whoa, I did not see this coming. That was actually really, really nice. I was blown away, to be honest. Had not seen that coming. So, yeah, I'm really going to try and take a deeper look.
Well, we have trials.
So that the decision to use jQuery Mobile,
Yeah.
was that the customer that had made a decision, we want this made?
Yeah, as I was trying to say, it was an existing web app.
Yeah.
So it had been built like, I think they did it like a year before I came
Yeah.
into the team. So I don't know why they chose it.
Okay.
They, I think, wanted also a hybrid app with their own design, like, yeah. And I guess they thought that was the best way to go.
I think a lot of the time, like, decisions such as that is a result of people going back to something they know. So there's been someone in the organization who was familiar with it and then thought, well, this is what we're going with. And I think that's actually one of the most dangerous things that we as developers and organizations can do, is fall in love with something and then just use that for the sake of using it, whatever the technology may be.
Yeah.
And I can't remember whether it was Bjarne Stroustrup or where it was who saw a video and he said, "Oh, you should learn a new language each year." So or try out new technology now and then, just to do it and just to get informed and change your perspective now and then.
Well, I totally agree. I think that was the case.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time I've seen it. Certainly not. But it's reality, you know. Unfortunately.
Yeah, but I think we have a responsibility as well to maybe provoke whoever's making the decision or take part in making the decision on, well, maybe we should try out something else. Maybe we should use another technology or take an experiment on this and do an exploration on it. Running away.
Yes, can anybody hear me? Good. I'm a native iOS developer at Trifork. I've had some experience integrating hybrid pages into our native app. In my experience, that gives a subpar user experience. And then thinking about PhoneGap and jQuery Mobile and stuff like that, in my opinion, performance lags massively. It's like pressing a button, you can feel a delay. I think web technologies are simply not suited for doing native apps whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean,
That's,
Mark
I want to
Zuckerberg-
put that up into the air.
Mark
Performance.
Zuckerberg
And
said,
on top of that, I'm not sure about Xamarin, but my understanding is Xamarin compiles to native code.
yeah.
It's not, there's not a virtual machine with the C# code is running.
So it really depends. So on iOS, we compile down to a native ARM assembly. So we do ahead of time compilation. For Android, we have two options. Because Apple say you can't JIT on the device. Apple are very clear about that, so we have to do ahead of time. Now on Android, we can JIT. So historically, a Xamarin Android app would use our own runtime, which we load up next to Delvik, and they communicate with each other. But you can also now do ahead of time compilation for Android. But in terms of your comment about performance, as I was trying to say, Mark Zuckerberg said the biggest mistake Facebook has made is betting too much on HTML5. And I always think that if a company with the resources of Facebook, and did anyone see the post? I think it was on Reddit about they can't scale for iOS. And iOS simply isn't powerful enough for them, so they've re-implemented like 80,000 classes. And they're hackers. They're like slapping fix on fix and bad code. It sounds horrible, their engineering practices. But yeah, they bet on hybrid, couldn't do it. And I just don't think with the amount of developers that they've got, 4,000 commits in 1 week with 400 plus developers working just on the iOS projects. So let's assume that they took those 400 developers and said you're now going hybrid, and 400 developers couldn't produce an app that could get more than 2-star. Because they took a 5-star app to 2-star in one release. If 400 people can't do it, then myself as an individual, I'm probably going to struggle. That's just my opinion on hybrid. But I get as I said before, I get where it's useful when you've got that pixel perfect design. Your designer has come to you with something that looks identical for Windows Phone, Android and iOS. You're going to save so much time and money going hybrid. But if you care about how it looks and how it feels, and you care about the end user, then you have to go native.
My name is Joaquin, and I've been a web developer for some years now. And my interest for mobile development has mainly come pretty much as a hobby. I just had to stand up when you said that web wasn't suited for mobile.
In the browser, yes.
Well, I just wanted to say that you kind of have to put that into context, because it's also true that mobile technologies have evolved a lot during the last years. And apart from mobile technologies evolving, the tooling has also evolved a lot. So there's actually web hybrid solutions, web-based hybrid solutions. I particularly looked into, for example, Ionic framework. I don't know if you're familiar with it, and that's based on Angular 2, and they've actually tackled a lot of the problems that hybrid has. They've tackled several problems in how the look and feel is, and they managed, for example, to get the same product to look different depending on which platform you deploy that on. Of course, it still doesn't feel right, but I mean, for a developer that wants to put their app on the market as soon as possible and doesn't have many resources, it's a perfect solution as well. And other than that, going even further with the tooling, just recently Facebook released React Native, where for me it was great to say, okay, I don't have to learn any iOS, I don't have to learn any Android, but with my knowledge on web development, I can deploy a native app. And well, if you look at the examples of those apps that there are in the market. Just as an example of that, Facebook released their Facebook Ads application based on React Native. And if you look at the app, it looks like crap, kind of. It doesn't have anything smart, but it's there, and it feels native, and it feels good, right? And it's a start, and it's a new technology that just got there, right? So.
I think the key thing there is that you said that you don't have to learn iOS, Android. That is where hybrid fails, and I think that's also where Xamarin Forms fails as well to some degree, in that people assume that because they've got this abstraction that they don't need to learn the platform. And I'm not saying you need to learn the APIs of the platform, I'm saying you need to get in the headspace of the user of that device. And when people are talking about it doesn't feel right, it's because you've styled the button with your CSS to make it look legit Android, but you press it down and it sits there for a bit too long before it pops back up, and that's not a threading issue or a performance issue, it's just your CSS is marginally out, and they pick up on all the tiny little subtleties that are wrong because you as a developer don't know that platform. I think you owe it to yourself, if you're going to try and hit all three platforms, to go and get a device of each and actually use it for some time. I wouldn't dream of deploying an app to Android without using an Android device for a considerable amount of time, and I wouldn't try and deploy to Apple Watch without owning and using one.
But that's where I think it's really important that you put things into context. If you're a startup company with a limited amount of resources, and even if you consider that the app is like a central piece of your business, it's there's very few companies in the startup world that can really deal with releasing an app in 2 or 3
choose
different
one platform and do it right. It's what Instagram did. They chose, and WhatsApp did it as well. They chose iOS first. They monetized it. They proved the business on the one platform. They got it right, and then when they had the resources, they went and targeted the other platforms.
And that will have to be the final